I want to start off by saying I'm very honored to be here with you, and I appreciate Daryl's invitation. You know, and like I said last night, the hospitality is very much we appreciate, and has been very good, and we feel welcome here. And hearing the other speakers, very much kindred spirits, you know, of serious Catholics, taking family seriously, parenting seriously. So, you know, it's just an honor to be able to share the weekend with you, share some of our own experiences, because there were those that went before us that helped us out, and that's how we know what we know. So in addition to my bio from yesterday, the other thing to know about me is that, for one, I'm not credentialed in any of this. I'm not a family therapist or a marriage therapist or a counselor or even an educator for that matter. I do believe I have an educator gene because my mother taught 40+ years of elementary school, maybe longer than that, and I enjoy it. I really do. It's a passion, but it's an I guess a moonlighting thing. I have a day job. So the other thing to know about me personally is that I'm passionately in love with my wife of 27 years. Now, there's a difference between, in my mind, between loving and being in love. And that's pretty much what we're going to talk about that in this session. Thing to know about marriage as a Catholic is that it is a sacrament. Okay, so Christ raised matrimony to the level of a sacrament. And it is supposed to image the Trinity. Okay, so that's our goal when we make the vow of matrimony. We are supposed to image the Trinity. That means it's sacred. Very intimate relationship with the person who's supposed to be the most important person to you, to us on the planet. That means it requires time. It puts a burden on us to make sure we honor that commitment of what it takes. So that's part one. Part two, we'll get into some troubleshooting, some real life difficulties that we're faced with in the 21st century of being men, being married men, the threats, the temptations that are there. The two primary ones we'll discuss in addition to what anybody else wants to ask about. It's going to be fear, how fear shrivels manhood, and impurity and how that undercuts our masculinity and our marriage. So let's get into the whole idea of romance. You know, and it's fun because we're talking about a lot of serious matter this weekend, and I get the fun talk, and it's a good idea to put that at this time when everybody's going to be going to sleep. It's kind of after lunch, you know, but it'll probably keep everybody's attention. But what I'd like for us to do, we're on a retreat here, right? So what I would like for us to do is to let our overriding theme here, I want to throw out a term and let that kind of float over the information that's going to come after it. And there's actually an image of this on the mural behind the altar in the chapel here. But when the angel of the Lord appeared to the Blessed Virgin, greatest event to occur in the history of the universe, waiting ages for who was going to be the chosen virgin to bring forth the Messiah, to bring forth the Savior. They knew it was going to happen. You know, so he makes the declaration to her in the invitation. And what's her response? Her response is, how can that be since I do not know man? So those of us who are married have a knowledge. And that's what should be the overriding theme here. When we encounter in the conjugal act with our spouse, and it's undefiled, it's chaste, open to life, all those issues, it's a source of grace. We have to realize that. You know, it's an act that not channels grace, actually is a source of grace because of the sacramental nature of it. So again, talking about serious matter here. Overriding theme. So let's get down into the nuts and bolts. What do you want from marriage? What does your spouse want? What do husbands and wives want? Do you know? Do you know what you want? Do you know what your wife wants? Venerable Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen, the Thomist expert, you know, I listened to and read all things Sheen for a number of years, not realizing I was being schooled in Aquinas. In several of his works that I've heard, one being 3 to Get Married. He says, a woman or a man enters into marriage for a woman. A woman enters into marriage for a child. We're different. We're wired different. We're going to have differences and different ambitions and goals of what we're getting into. I'm going to come across this with this from the perspective as a romantic, and I'm going to get a little further into that in a little while, but just real life example. This is what we do. We developed a routine years ago. I think the millennials today call it adulting, right? We were doing a lot of adulting. We were having babies. We were doing work. You know, we were homeschooling. So there was a lot of attention being drawn away from each other, away from our relationship. So we made a choice. We made a decision. We said, well, we need some time to ourselves. And so we made that decision to have a date night every week. So we made that commitment to each other. And so Saturday night is our night. Now, it started off years and years ago when we had little bitty kids. It might just be just turning everything off, turning off the phones, off the TV, off the whatever else, computer, and maybe just having a cup of tea or coffee together. If we had infants or, you know, she was expecting, I might go out and get takeout Chinese or something, and back then we would rent movies, right? So we might go rent a movie and come back and just have that time to spend together. Now what we do, as I said, we have 7 children, 6 still at home, from 22 down to 9. So basically built-in babysitter, no really little bitty kids to worry about. And it actually, so we go out on Saturday night, and it actually gives them time as brothers and sisters to do something together that's good community building for them. So we live pretty much equidistant between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, 2 major cities in south central Louisiana, a little further south of the direct line. So what we like to do is actually go to either one of those and kind of alternate them each weekend, because we get an hour drive to talk. Have a nice meal, fine restaurants in both places, maybe do some shopping. Usually we'll come home whenever we're ready, watch a chick flick. And we get into she likes the romance and all, and I like to say I'm a romantic, I do too. And we like the classic ones, and there's the Jane Austen series, if y'all might be familiar with those. And one of my favorites is the BBC version of Pride and Prejudice. And what I like about these films is that the men are just so classy. They're so dignified. They dress well. They're so well spoken. They're gentlemen. They handle, you know, themselves around women very respectively. Just, you know, good role models, I guess we might say. It's good to see. And there's one, that Pride and Prejudice one in particular, there's the main character, her name is Lizzie. And the mother of the family here, her modus operandi obviously is to marry off all the daughters. Okay, so Lizzie had been pursued by a distant cousin, I guess distant enough to marry, who was actually a priest and a really nerdy kind of guy. So he was coming after her, and she immediately refuses him. And then she has this best friend, Charlotte Lucas. And so the minister, the preacher, ends up, after he's refused by her, goes to the best friend who agrees to marry him. And she is, again, the best friend. So Lizzie goes to Charlotte and is saying, well, she's kind of confused, like, how could you go for this sort of guy, you know? And she says, well, Lizzie, you know, I'm not too romantic. I never was. I only want a nice home and to be cared for. And, you know, she just wanted a simple life. She knew what she wanted. She's willing to marry him for that. Do we know what we want? Okay, again, does our spouse know, do we know what our spouse wants, what our wives want? And there's two terms I like to use coupled together. As I said, you know, make a decision. I made a decision. It's in the book in chapter 11, the intimate companionship chapter. That's been the most popular thing. That's what people are geared toward, what they're interested in. And so it kind of gets a target there when people pick up the book. Page 135, I talk about how I came to this. I knew going in that I wanted to have a lifelong, passionate, romantic relationship with the woman that I marry. We all go through changes. We all age. You know, things happen. But regardless, it wasn't going to be an emotion. It was a decision that this is the way I envision marriage to be for me. You know, so whoever I decided to commit to would have to be able to work with that. Commitment is the word. Decision and commitment. So commitment is chapter 4, and I want to hit 2 points on commitment. Because it's one thing to make a decision. We can proclaim that I'm going to do this, but then some action has to follow behind that. Otherwise, it wasn't really a decision. So we have to have concrete action behind a commitment that's going to fulfill that decision. So, first being purpose. Okay, so we have, in ordering our life and ordering the activities of our day-to-day life, we have to know what our purpose is. If we are married, if we make the Catholic commitment of matrimony, that, gentlemen, is our purpose. Everything we do revolves around that. We were talking earlier about work-life balance and the number of hours and all. Work should be at the service of the marriage, not vice versa. So if work is not working for your marriage, find another job. You know, in my neck of the woods, we're free agents. If this employer is not working for us, we can jump to another one. You know, we're not under contract, at-will employment. We can go wherever. And maybe in the discussion section I can elaborate on that some more. So that should orient us as to how we're going to decide things, that purpose. The other thing being results. Okay, let me see something here. Oh, I don't have my copy of it. Okay, no problem. I was looking for the Into the Breach. But results. We should, whenever we're deciding those day-to-day activities we're going to do, we should have some results we seek to achieve. In this case, we're talking about the outcome or the achievement of a certain goal within marriage. So those things that we have to do might not necessarily be the actual thing we would like to do, the pleasurable thing that we'd like to do. Can you pass that to me, please? And so, but it might arrive at a desired result. In other words, I want money. So if I want money, but I want to go to the ball game, instead I have to go to work to get money. Whereas the more pleasurable thing might be going to the ball game, right? Same thing here. you know, we might have something to do that more pleasurable that we'd want to do, but then we might have to actually invest some time into our marriage. Because why? Because it's going to achieve desired results. And isn't that very Catholic in nature? Because it's sacrificial. You know, it's giving up what we want for something higher. In this document, which was released about 2 years ago to yesterday, actually, on the Feast of the Archangels, in 2015 by the Bishop of Phoenix to the men of his diocese. It talks about who, as a Catholic man, is to be our model, and of course, it is our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Because it says, when pertaining to marriage, St. Paul says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, because he gave his life for her. We are to give up those pleasurable things of our life for something higher, something better. And I thought it very appropriate. I was reading this on the flight over yesterday. They quote St. Jose Maria Escrivá. He says, there is a need for a crusade of manliness and purity to counteract and nullify the savage work of those who think of man as a beast. And that crusade is your work. St. Jose Maria tells us. So it's into the breach. It's the root of the work we're supposed to be doing. How do we treat our wives? And in that, I mean, do we, there was a term, I don't know if it's used in the North, but when I was a kid down south, I would hear men referring to the old lady. And at first I thought they were talking about their mom, but their mom was nowhere around. And then I came to find out they were talking about their wives, and as a kid, that registered to me that I hope I never marry an old lady. See, because words mean things. Zig Ziglar, I mean, he would say, he told his kids to call him fat boy, and he ended up becoming overweight. You know, and he also said, you know, if you treat your wife like a hag or a slave, you're going to have a hag or a slave to come home to. It's just, how do we treat her? And again, the commitment of the time. I talked about the weekend, the date night, and we talked about this earlier, work-life balance. We actually do schedule time and commit time every evening to make sure we connect. Every evening. Usually a half an hour at least. You know, I hate to be that concrete, but when things get really busy for me, I kind of have to put things in slots. And so we agree on a time, you know, once all the kids are down or the older kids are into their studies or whatever tasks they're doing, you know, that's our time to be able to just connect with each other. There's going to be some detractions or distractions from all this, because the evil one, Satan, seeks to destroy marriage. Okay, that his attack point is the family, and the primary attack point within the family is us, husbands. He's seeking to get to our wives and children through us. That's Satan's attack point right now. And so there's going to be some things, and he's very clever, you know, an intelligent spirit, fallen, so understands what we are and has a certain strategy, because he cloaks things that are defiled and deplorable and ugly as being beautiful. And men tend to fall for that. Why? Because of concupiscence that we have received as a result of original sin. And I believe it was either Christopher West or Tim Staples that made this analogy or description kind of come alive for me. Because when Christ gives us the teaching on lust, the passage goes like this: you have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery in her heart, with her in his heart, has committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. That's Matthew chapter 5, verse 27, 29. Is our Lord suggesting that we should mutilate our own body in order to prevent sin? Is he? If your right eye causes you to sin. See, because our temptation is justification. So we know through the science that we are visual as men, right? So Satan knows that, so that's the temptation he places before us. Very much visual temptations all around us right now. So we could use that as a crutch and say, well, you see, there's no use. I'm just visual. That's just the way I am. Christ is saying that's not the problem. If that's the problem, because he says earlier, he says, you've already committed adultery in the heart. The heart is the problem. We lack the commitment that we should have in that intimate union we're supposed to have with the spouse that we made through holy matrimony. The problem is the heart, not the eye. So we have the ability, because we are higher beings, higher than the animals. We have an intellect. We have a will. We can use our mind to control our body. We can diffuse thoughts. We can diffuse inordinate passions. We can decide to turn our glance away. We can decide to leave the scene of a tempting situation. You know, we can make that decision as intelligent human beings. Also, we need to have the level of communication with our wife for her to understand us and us to understand her, to where, yeah, as I said earlier, we're wired different. So we're going to have a different drive, a different interest in intimacy than she will. Hers is going to vary, be up and down. Ours is going to be heightened almost all the time. She has to know that. If we are being neglected in that area, that throws us open to temptation more. That could be a near occasion of sin. So she needs to know that she could be contributing to that. We have to be able to have that communication. My wife and I had to come to that level of knowledge of this reality, of the differences between us and what's really common amongst males and females in this particular area. I see these as progression sins, where, sort of like anger. You know, if you leave a crack in the door, if you let Satan get a foothold, it could really explode on you, and it's very hard to douse at that point. But if you just snuff it right at the beginning, these sins of the flesh, these temptations to look, if you just shut it down and say no right away, so much easier to deal with and handle and control. So how do we solve this? This is actually solved by purity, uprightness, and propriety. You know, we just practice, again, the opposite, the virtue that's opposite the sin. And I get into that in chapter 2, which is the first tool. We have a tool chest as men, and that's the first half of the book. The first tool being strength. And actually, we can help develop our strength, further build our strength by practicing purity. And the bishop gets into that in the document, that purity is not a weakness. Now, society will tell you, you know, you're a sissy or it's weak or whatever, but it's very weak to give in to impurity. It's easy to do that. You just give way to your savage nature. It takes a strong man to harness this. St. John Paul II said in Theology of the Body, our sex drive is the strongest drive we possess. So it's stronger than our desire for food, desire for money, desire for power. It's our strongest desire. So if we can harness that, we can build interior strength that's beyond anything, any other way. And interior strength is what matters. So that's the romance side and the I guess the pitfalls. Let's get into a little bit of the. I want to talk just a little on communication and just some of the real life issues. And I know we're going to cover that more deeply, but this is just kind of how it relates to the romance side, because this is actually what women want. You know, we predominantly have that desire for physical connection, where they want an emotional connection. They want to talk about things. They want to talk about deep things that are close to their heart, that are important to them. And that's common because they have that emotional nature that is great for having and raising babies. That's what they're supposed to be. And I remember a talk that I heard the audio on by Dr. Brant Petrie, and he talked. It was on marriage, but he had encountered a deacon at a parish where he was given a mission, and this deacon would deal with troubled marriages. In every case, the issue that the husbands had with their wives, in every case, the main issue was, she doesn't respect me. In every case, the issue that the wives had with their husbands, primary issue, was, he doesn't choose me. They want to be chosen. And men, we tend to choose the other thing, whether it be work, whether it be sports, whether it be the iPhone, whether it be the evil things we just talked about, the impure things, whether it be pornography or outright, physical infidelity. So again, they are looking to be chosen for this intimate conversation. And I want to move into talking about these issues of fear, and mainly fear at this point. And that's, again, in chapter 2, I talk about courage. And courage isn't necessarily the absence of fear, or it's not at all. Because fear is real, fear is there. And courageous men overcome fear, decide against it. And sometimes in the issue of communication, and I've heard from many men on this, is that I'm kind of shocked that men can't talk to their wives at certain points. They'll know something's up with her, and they will 180 and run in the other direction. Maybe say, I got to go to work, maybe I'm going fishing, maybe I'm going here. But they are afraid to know what's up with her. They'll just say, oh, hopefully she'll get over it. It's not just a passing thing, but it's just something that is there. And there's this issue, and they're just not able to resolve it because they're not communicating. The whole concept of fear, one thing we have to realize, as Catholics, the only time we should have any ounce of fear, give in to any ounce of fear, is if we're not in a state of grace. If we're in mortal sin, that's something to be afraid of. Because if we die, then no hope. It's all over, no recourse. So that's something to be afraid of. If we're in a state of grace, we should be wide open, doing whatever we got to do, whatever we're called to do, without any reservations. Nothing to fear, no fear. But again, Satan knows us, and he uses that. So in chapter 2 on page 21, I have a paragraph from the Catechism about evil and fear. But in layman's terms, this is the way I see it. If we're in a state of grace and we're sensing fear, we just need to look somewhere under a rock around the corner for the devil and drive him out from wherever we are. Whether we say, Satan be gone, throw some holy water around, grab a sacramental, say a Hail Mary, say another prayer, Satan, leave. Because I'm a child of God, I'm in a state of grace. Grace is more powerful than you. Be gone. The main fears I hear predominantly in men, one being fear of failure. And I believe that's a bit of subtle manifestation of pride. We don't want to look silly. We don't want to be embarrassed if we try something and doesn't work out. But how do we ever learn anything but by failing at it? How does a kid learn how to ride a bike? He's going to fall off. He's going to get on and get off, fall off, get on, fall off, get on until he gets it. And so, and things we're called to we're called to do by God, you know, that whether it be in our family life or in business or, you know, doing things like this retreat. You know, we have to have that courage to risk, you know, if it's God's will that we do it. The other big fear that's predominant amongst men is fear of poverty. And again, kind of a shocker in a place like the United States anyway, where it's probably the wealthiest, most progressed, most comfortable civilization that's ever existed, that we would fear poverty. So again, look for the devil. What is he doing there? This is our primary responsibility. Not the primary, one of the primary responsibilities. Pretty close up there, maybe number 2. Because when God approached Adam after his original sin, approached Adam and Eve, he said, Eve, you're going to have pains in childbirth. Adam, you're going to work by the sweat of your brow to provide for them. That became our duty. You know, we're children of that. So he's going to use that as an attack point because he knows that's our primary duty and try to make us feel like we're failing at it. And we just have to see things differently and do things differently. There's going to be financial concerns. We just need to know that as a reality of being a family man. I had a nephew-in-law a few years back, came to me, wanted some advice. He was having a financial problem. And I said, Chad, you have a $600 problem. You got to figure it out. Now I helped him through it, of course. But my point to him was, in 10, 15 years from now, you are going to have a $6,000 problem. You need this experience right now. It's not that you're having a failure. It's that you're having a hardship or difficulty or struggle so that you can learn something through it. And I deal with a lot of people over social media as well. So I had a young dad, upper Midwest. He was in a situation, he had to move his family. I think it was for a job, kind of a last-minute move or a rushed move. It was snowing, and it wasn't going good. And he's kind of leaning on me, asking me about it. I said, Jody, I said, you're not failing. I said, you have a difficult situation right now. And you have a certain amount of information. You're charged with making the decision for your family. Who's to say if you would have decided anything different that it would have came out any better? And I think his wife was questioning him or being critical of him in this case. Who's to say it would have came out any better? Hindsight's 20/20. You never know. Maybe your family actually had to go through this inconvenience at this point for their own growth. You know that you made the decision you made with the information you had with goodwill. As dads, I just think it's important that we manage expectations among our family. Let them know what the possibilities are, you know, that we don't promise the world. And the way I've done this is whenever something big that was going to come about that involved finances, whether it be, you know, making a move or, you know, acquiring something or taking a trip, I wanted to be 90, 95, 99% sure it was going to happen. If there was any bit of doubt, I wouldn't say anything about it. I'll plan stuff out all the time, but they don't know what I'm planning. A lot of times my wife won't even know, you know, because before I want it to be pretty certain before I start introducing it. So know your mate. Again, knowledge. We have to know each other. And if you came across John Eldridge's series of books, Wild at Heart, he and his wife wrote a companion book called Captivating. And he described it as this. He says, woman is not a problem to be solved. She is a mystery to be enjoyed. They have that feminine mystique, you know, and that's something we just need to know about them. We're not going to always be able to figure them out. But enjoy that mystery that they possess as women. And the overall, what the realization is that, see, we're seeing this 27 years later as our children are growing And it's just like a project we've done together, doing life together. And we see the fruits of our labor. But that's not all. Our goal is to get to heaven together. You know, our role as a husband, first and foremost, get ourselves to heaven, but then make sure we're bringing our wife and hopefully our kids along with us. But we're responsible for our wife also after that, after ourselves. Difficulty for us is listening, okay? And in my profession, I'm a trained listener, so I get to cheat a little bit. But it's tough because, you know, they just want to tell, like somebody said earlier, they just want to tell you the whole thing. My father was talking about this morning. She's going through this long explanation of this thing. Get to the point. And they want to give you all the details. And the issue is, it might be an issue and they don't want us to fix it. Have you seen that? You might have seen that YouTube of the nail. And it's close up of this lady. She's in agony. She's literally in agony. And she's saying, oh, it's throbbing so bad and just hurts. And it zooms out and there's a nail in her forehead. And her husband is looking at her saying, well, dear, there's a nail in your forehead. And she says, you see, you always want to fix it. Would you just listen? And then he says, oh, that must be very painful. And she says, oh, how sweet of you. And women will watch this and they will laugh at themselves saying, this is so true. Just realize it might be painful to you to hear it, but that's what we're there for, to hear those things that are really touching them down deep and really hurting like a nail in their head, but in their heart actually. We got to go through changes in life. We just got to realize it's stages. I mean, we went through a stage where a baby every couple of years, boom, boom, boom. You know, we had the pregnancy, you had the delivery, you had the postpartum, you had the nursing, and you know all the issues that go along with all that. And then there comes another one. And no regrets. Now I'm saying not that at all, but just the realities of dealing with everything that goes along with it. After 4, a miscarriage, going through that experience together emotionally and just, you know, realizing what just happened. Then 3 more, now adult children, going through teenagers and adult children and watching them go off into the world. You know, how did we do raising these beings that are going out there now? There's a lot goes in it. We got to stay in touch. Then we have different experiences, right? We might change jobs. We might change homes. All brings about different dynamic spiritual experiences we go through. You know, what's our spiritual growth? Is there any stagnation there? Knowing each other. Or if we get into business ventures. Then sometimes communication will fade. Like I said, we'll drive long distances together. And sometimes, and we're good with being quiet. You know, we don't mind just not necessarily talking the whole time. You know, if she wants to talk, I'll listen. But we're good with being quiet too and just enjoying each other's company and companionship. But sometimes I'll say, well, you're quiet. And she'll just smile and say, well, ask me a question. And so I'll think of something. It might be something she's reading or she helps the ladies in the apostolate, somebody she's working with, or, you know, something applicable to kids. It's open-ended question where she can just, and then she'll go on for hours, seems, once you just open it up, prime the pump. And then there'll be situations where they clam up. And that's where I get to really do my work. Now, she's allowed that. I mean, I sense that some ladies might say, I don't want to talk about it. You know, that's a different challenge. We've never had that. You know, I'll approach and prod and attack every angle until we get this thing opened up. You know, because I don't like to see her bottled up like that. It's just not a good situation. So, again, know your mate, what works for you. You might have to give some downtime to that. But Zig said you can have everything in life you want if you help others get what they want. Same thing in marriage. St. John Paul II, in a lot of his writings on marriage, talked about this reciprocity. If you give what she wants, it's like with God, so much in return. You know, we're filled that much more back up through the intimacy with our own wives, the person supposed to be most important to us in our life. Good marriages don't just happen. It takes work. And grace, the grace that comes through the sacraments, is a power tool. But we know about power tools. We can have an overgrown lawn, and in our shed, we might have the latest, greatest, most powerful zero-turn mower there. But if no one goes, open the door to the shed, get on the mower, and start mowing, we're still going to have an overgrown lawn. Same thing here. We can be in the state of grace, and I've seen this a lot in marriage. We could be in a state of grace, but still have a marriage that's just ho-hum or dysfunctional, because we're not participating with that grace. That grace is there for us. It merits, but we have to also participate with it with our own free will and our own action. So that's what we're tasked with as Catholic men, in making marriage to be the type of relationship that will image the Trinity. God bless you.
Thank you, Rick.